Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is William Ury. I will tell you all about William in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that deals with what's often dismissed as the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment we exert. And when you do it from a leadership position or work with leaders, as you will definitely discover that William has done throughout his long career, you do it with a common cause of bringing people together for common cause. William Ury, it is an honor to welcome you to Grace Under Pressure. So,
John, it's a huge pleasure. I love the idea of grace and purpose. So it's so congruent with everything that I've always worked on.
Well, it is my honor. So you are one of the world's best known negotiations. Your book, Getting to Yes, has sold 15 million copies, which I have been telling my colleagues, you already own this or have 3 or 4 copies of this book. And I know I've had a couple of copies and I've given them to clients over the years. So you are the gold standard for negotiation. You're the co-founder of Harvard's program on negotiation, and you have served as a negotiator in the real world, some of the toughest disputes. I know recently you worked with the State Department throughout your career, Fortune 500 companies. You've been to partisan wars in the Middle East, Colombia, Korea, and most recently, Ukraine. William Ury, it is an honor to have you on the show, sir. So,
it's a huge pleasure, John.
Great. And you're here because you have a brand new book called Possible: How We Survive and Thrive in an Age of Conflict. Wow. So I want to set it up. We live in an age of misinformation, disinformation, and we're so torn apart by our partisanship. It is discouraging. However, you're not one who is discouraged. Why not?
Well, it's true, John. The situation is serious. I don't want to underestimate that. At the same time, I've spent the last 45 years of my life working as a negotiation advisor and mediator in some of the world's toughest conflicts, from labor strikes to boardroom battles to civil wars around the world. And I've seen with my own eyes how people can take situations that are seemingly impossible, situations that are even worse than the one we're facing today, where large amounts of blood have flowed, and transform them into constructive negotiation, democracy, kind of honest conversation. It's not about ending the conflict. It's about transforming it. And that's why when people ask me, are you an optimist? Are you a pessimist? I like to say, actually, I'm a possibilist. I believe in human possibility.
I was going to ask you about that term, which I believe you have coined. So what does it mean to be a possibilist?
Well, I don't know if I coined it, but what it means is it's someone, and I believe your whole audience, anyone listening to your show, is a possibilist. You believe in human possibility. You believe in growth. You believe in grace. You believe in, and what it means is when you see an obstacle, you look for where are the possibilities. You look for where is the potential, even the small potential, to begin to change that situation bit by bit. And to me, what I'd love to take is our natural inherent capabilities, which all of us have, for curiosity, for creativity, for collaboration, and apply it to these thorny, sticky, troubling, tricky, conflicts that we face. Because I believe if we can transform our conflicts, we can transform our lives, we can transform our world.
Powerful, powerful thought. And now you say in your possibilist mindset that conflict, contrary to what many, including me, might assume, is a starting point, not a departure point. What's your reasoning for using conflict as a departure point? So, as a starting point.
That's a starting point. Well,
I just destroyed your whole book right there.
I love it.
On me.
I love it, John. So I used to think conflict was something, negative and whatever. I'm an anthropologist by training, actually, and a negotiator, mediator by profession, but but I've come to realize, conflict is something natural. It's part of life, and in its in its uh, and it can be perfectly healthy. The question is not about getting rid of conflict. It's about, can we transform conflict? Can we change the form from destructive fighting, vicious fighting, into constructive, creative, open negotiation where we lean into, we embrace conflict, and we see what we can do. And in that sense, conflict is, we actually may need more conflict, not less, because conflict is what allows us to grow, to develop, and to learn as human beings and as organizations, as societies.
I love that thought. William Ury says we need more conflict. But no,
it's not to keep me in business. Believe me, it's because, conflict's at the essence of, in business, you surface different points of view, you surface diversity, and that's how you get the best decisions. And the same thing is true in democracy. So even in a marriage, that, psychologists say that, the secret to a good marriage is to be able to embrace and deal with our differences, not to avoid them and pretend they don't exist.
Great. Now, you have a 3-step model to achieve these possibilities, and 3 simple words, but they're very powerful. I want to take each one by itself. The first is balcony. What does it mean when you negotiate with the concept of balcony?
Well, John, this is my this is maybe the biggest lesson I've learned over the last 40 years, is that the single biggest obstacle to me achieving what I want in a negotiation is not the difficult person on the other side of the table. It's right here. It's me. It's myself. It's the person I look at in the mirror every morning. It's our own very understandable, natural tendency to react. React out of fear, out of anger. It's to act without thinking. As the old saying goes, when you're angry, you will make the best speech you will ever regret. And so what I find successful negotiators doing is they take a step back from the situation. It's almost like you imagine that you're negotiating on a stage, and you go to a mental and emotional balcony overlooking that stage, a place of calm, a place of perspective, a place where you can see the larger picture. That's the key. That's the foundation. If you want to, it turns out negotiation is an inside job. It works from the inside out. So we need to start with going to the balcony.
Now, the flip side of that is wallowing in the gutter. So why doesn't that not work, William?
Well, as Gandhi once said, an eye for an eye, and we all go blind. And
I have never heard that. Great concept.
And that's what happens is particularly in this world where we're so interdependent, in our work relationships, in our personal relationships, in our societal relationships, the choice, we can each harm each other. We go at it, winning. Okay, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to beat, we're out to win. And yet what often happens is a lose-lose outcome where we both lose. No matter who wins the lawsuit, everybody loses. And the truth is, not just do both parties lose, but the team loses, the organization loses, the society loses, the family loses. We end up with lose outcomes. And to me, the greatest power we have as a negotiator is the power to change the game to one where we all can benefit rather than we can all lose.
I like how the word transformation has come up in our short dialogue already, and said change the game. So the next one is the concept of bridge. So we've been on a balcony. What does it mean to bridge? Is it a verb? Is it a noun? Or how do we work this?
It's both a verb and a noun. But what I often see is when we get into conflict, we take positions, right? And we kind of dig into our positions and we kind of push. And the more we push, the other side pushes back. So we end up at a kind of standoff, right? What I find successful negotiators do is the opposite of pushing, which is they attract. Instead of making it harder for the other side, which is where we go sometimes in conflict, our job is to make it easier for them to make the decision we want them to make. That's the art of building them a golden bridge. It's almost like our mind is here. Their mind is way over there. We have to leave where our thinking is for a moment, begin the conversation where their thinking is, what their concerns are, what their fears are, and proceed to build them a bridge over the giant chasm that separates us, that chasm of unmet needs, dissatisfaction, baggage from the past, all that stuff. We need to build them an attractive golden bridge moving in the direction we want them to move.
Powerful concept. So we've got balcony, bridge. Now there's something different, and you call it the third element, which is the third side. What is that? What does the third side mean, William?
Well, John, it's hard for people to go to the balcony. When you're in conflict, it's sometimes really hard. It's hard to build a golden bridge. It's hard to listen to the other side. It's hard to come up with creative options when you're enmeshed in these conflicts. And we need help. Where's that help going to come from? And the thing is, in conflicts, we often tend to reduce everything to two sides. It's labor versus management, it's sales versus manufacturing, it's husband versus wife. It's two sides. But in fact, as we know, there's not just two sides, there's always a third side, which is the community. It's the side of the whole. It's the people around, it's the coworkers, it's the team, it's the organization, it's the relatives, it's the friends. And if you can mobilize that third side, you can use it to help transform the situation. You get help. People, third siders, you're probably a third sider. In fact, anyone listening to this call probably plays the role often of a third side. There's a kind of third side leadership, which is leadership of the whole, to kind of, hey, what about, we've got common interests. We've got a common goal. We've got a family here. We've got a community. It's that third side that can help us go to the balcony, help us calm down, can help us build that bridge, can bring us together, play all those roles. So it's basically, in these very difficult situations that we face, we need to go to the balcony, we need to build that bridge, but we also often need to engage that third side.
Let me ask a follow-up. One of my favorite quotes, paraphrasing from John Adams, our second president or founding father, talked about, in retrospect, about the American Revolution. He said, a third of us were true blue, a third of us were Tory, and a third were sitting on the fence waiting to see who won. Is that part of the third element too, William?
It is. And that's why we need to engage it. Like in this country right now, there are the people who are battling, but the great majority they're called the exhausted majority. You wouldn't know it from watching the media, but it turns out that most Americans, the great majority of Americans, still believe that there's more that unites us than what divides us. More Americans still believe.
I love to hear that. Please be
yeah, the polls actually suggest it. More Americans still believe it's possible to disagree in a healthy way. More Americans still believe that it's our responsibility to reach out to people with whom we have different points of view. If we can mobilize what John Adams was called, then that majority can create a container, a safe space within which the different poles can begin to be integrated, and we can find a way to slowly transform that conflict. That's where our hope is in mobilizing the third side, which is this power, this latent power that exists in every situation, which can be used to help turn an impossible situation. I mean, I saw it happen in, like, take South Africa. There's a racial war, apartheid, whatever. The third side was the business community, the labor community, the faith community, the university students. The community came together and said, hey, enough is enough. And they were backed by an international third side of people said, and that's how the situation transformed. Same thing happened in Northern Ireland between Catholics and Protestants. The mothers first, it's like there's third siders who show up and say, hey, we can carry on our conflict, but not destructively. There are constructive ways to deal with this. And that's how these impossible situations get turned around.
Now, I have to ask you a dumb question, but that's probably stock and trade.
There are no dumb questions.
Well, the way you talk about negotiations, and then I look at you, are you an advisor or a mediator? And when we talk about negotiation, are you talking about the constituents themselves coming to the negotiation, not William? Can you
Well,
explain that to me? So,
negotiation, the way I would define it very simply and very broadly, John, is simply the act of back and forth communication, trying to reach agreement. You have some interests which you hold in common, and other interests like a relationship, and other interests that are in tension with each other. And in that broad sense of the term, we're negotiating. Everyone is a negotiator. Every one of us is negotiating. When I ask leaders and managers, they'll say, 50% of my time, 70%. And then if you think about negotiating with yourself, which we do, it can go up to 100%. So in that broader sense of the term, we're all negotiators. Now, some people, I play the role sometimes of being a kind of third sider, of being a mediator, or being an advisor to one side to help them in a difficult situation. But all mediation is assisting negotiation. So in that sense, it's this process of persuasion, of influence that we all know when we have difficulties, when we have conflicts, that turns out to be the key. And I believe it's got to be one of the key core competencies of any manager, any leader, of how do you negotiate? Because life nowadays, you can only get what you want if you can negotiate for it.
No, I'm so glad you mentioned it. And I'm thinking about culture change, which many of you in this audience have lived through more times than they have bargained for or want. And we always say a successful culture change, and it's difficult, is that if it's not genuine to the people there, it cannot be imposed. It cannot be, consulting firms coming in and doing it. It can advise, but negotiation must be the same thing. It has to be inherent in the parties. Am I correct with that, William?
It is, absolutely. It's basically, it's inherent in the parties. I mean, you take little kids, we're all born with these abilities. And the question is, can we hone them? Can we develop them? And every one of these things I'm talking about, balcony is an inherent human superpower. Everyone has their favorite way to go to the balcony. It might be to take a breath. It might be to take a break. It might be whatever it is to do to go to the balcony. Everyone has their ability to build a bridge. Everyone is a possible third sider. What I see is what we need now is to harness our full human potential to deal with the real challenges that face us in a world that's getting increasingly disruptive and increasingly conflictual.
It's great. And I'll use the term, there's an inherent, you are a possibilist. And part of that is there's inured in there is a sense of realism, but also optimism. So much so that you say when conflict is that starting point and you sit down with the other party, draft your victory speech. So is that crazy, or where did you come up with that, William?
Well, first of all, yes, possibilists are realists. I mean, possibilists look, and I think we're all possibilists, at least anyone listening to the show, it's just the question is of applying possibility to conflicts. Possibilists look at negative possibilities too. They look at, wow, how could things go really badly wrong here in our organization, in our community, in our society, in our world? And then they use that understanding of negative possibilities to look for where are the positive possibilities. In other words, you get motivated by negative possibilities to look for where the positive possibilities. So possibilists are not Pollyannish. And one of the best iconic exercises of a possibilist, my favorite exercise, is when you're facing an impossible situation, is you start by working backwards. You go through a thought experiment, and you imagine that in this difficult situation, the other side actually says yes to what you want. The boss says yes to what you want. The board says yes to what you want. The team says yes to what you want. Now imagine that having said yes to what you want, they have to go back and face their constituency. It might be their board, their boss, their colleagues, their voters, whoever it is. And they have to deliver a victory speech in which they explain why they've decided to accept your proposal. What would be their 3 key talking points? What could they say? What would be the criticism that they would receive? Why'd you give in? What would be their best response? In other words, go through that exercise of imagining the other side's victory speech, and then see your job in the negotiation is, how can I help them deliver that victory speech? How can I set them up for success? And that switch to me, is one of the great tools in facing seemingly difficult conflicts.
I loved how you talked earlier. There's the possibilist side. You said most of us are that way because we believe in getting along with others and persuading and all of those positive things that you taught us in Getting to Yes, in that seminal book. I would guess that inherent in there is the concept of compromise. And I have always embraced that concept, but too often, particularly now in our polarized society, compromise is framed negatively. So if you are faced with that, say compromise is a dirty word, what's your comeback to that, William?
Yeah. Compromise sometimes is seen as weakness. It's kind of like you're surrendering your principles, you're surrendering. And so for me, the key in this, in negotiation, is to look behind the positions that people say. They're taking their really strong positions, and ask the question of what are the underlying interests? What are the needs? What are the values that are driving people? Surface those, talk about those, and then the question becomes framed not as just a split the difference compromise between two positions, neither of which is satisfactory to the other, but more a joint search for how can we find a way that is true to your principles, to your values, to your needs, to your concerns, and true to the other. And oftentimes in negotiation, there's kind of a classic example we used in Getting to Yes from actually someone Peter Drucker called the mother of modern management, Mary Parker Follett, who was watching two students quarrel in a library, and one wanted the window open and the other wanted it closed, and they got into a big quarrel, bothered everyone in the library. The librarian comes over and she asks the first one, "Why do you want the window open?" He says, "Well, I want some fresh air." She asks the second one, "Why do you want the window closed?" "Well, the wind is blowing my papers around." So then she says, "Well, how do we get you fresh air without you a draft?" And one of them I got an idea, and he opens a window in the next room, providing fresh air for the first person without a draft for the second. Now, in that very simple situation, you start off with two positions, closed window, open window. By asking the magical question why, you get to what's underneath it, which is fresh air, no draft. And that's what you see successful negotiators doing. Is that easy? No. When they're deep-seated values, but that's the kind of conversation. I brought, people from the right and the left together on numerous occasions, and you ask them, what are the underlying values? I want freedom. What motivates you? And once you get there, you say, well, how can we create a country that actually respects those values? And you find out there's a lot more common ground than you might expect.
Well, that is a possibilist thought. I embrace that. Now, one of the ways to bring people together is to listen to the other side. Well, duh, but why is it so hard for us to listen to people with different points of view, William?
Well, it's really hard. I mean, first of all, listening is hard work when you're hearing things you don't want to hear, when you're hearing things that press your buttons. And yet, we talk about negotiation as talking, but actually negotiation maybe has a lot more to do with listening than talking. There's a reason why we've got two ears and one mouth. It's to listen twice as much as we talk. And the reason, and how do you do that when it's difficult? Actually, the paradox I find actually is when you're finding it difficult to listen to someone else, begin by listening to yourself. In other words, the reason it's so hard to listen is there's so much going on in our mind and our emotions, and we're reacting. If you go to the balcony, you take a moment, whatever your favorite way. I love to go for walks, but it might be even you just take a deep breath or a couple deep breaths, or take a break or talk to a friend or whatever it is. Pay attention to what's going on for you. What are your emotions? What are your thoughts? If you listen to them, they're going to start to calm down. And then you can have more space to be able to listen to the other and take them into account. So the paradox is, if you want to listen to others, begin by listening to yourself.
That's a wonderful and warming thought. And there's a thought that I've heard from the poet Ocean Vuong. He talks about a sense of loss from an uncle of his. And then he said, you got to find your space, find your own fire escape. And you talked about that balcony too. And you mentioned the word pause. So when we are in tough negotiation, William, what are some tips to keep it real for us, or keep exploring? Because I keep dialogue. I need to take notes from this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, when you're so if you're going to tough negotiation, prepare. There's no substitute for preparation, and realize that you might not be able to find someone who can serve as your balcony. Maybe it's a colleague, a friend, a coach, an executive coach. I mean, you are probably, my guess, people listening to this are probably, a lot of your role is serving as a balcony for your clients, right?
Yes.
A place of perspective, a place of calm where they can, and you create a space in which they can reflect on what's truly important to them in that situation. What's their core interest? What's their core need in this situation? So when you're facing a tough negotiation, get help, and then rehearse. In other words, if you're going to make a tough speech, a hard speech, you would always rehearse, right? When you're in a tough negotiation, the stakes are often high. Rehearse, play it out with a friend. How would this work? How would that? And actually put the time into it, because these are some of the most important decisions that affect us. Why not prepare thoroughly?
That's a powerful thought. Now, the next step is that after the victory speech comes to fruition, and I'm thinking of Northern Ireland because you have been there, and I think of the example of Martin McGuinness, a leader in the Provisional IRA, Catholic, sitting down and negotiating with Ian Paisley on the Protestant side. You cannot think of two more people who came from different points of view. After a while of working together, they became known as the Chuckles because they got along so well. So how can we collaborate after negotiation?
Well, I mean, believe me, I met Martin McGuinness. He told me people had been giving him copies of Getting to Yes. And, and he was the reputed head of the IRA, which was a, terrorist group. And the fact that he and Ian Paisley, who was a firebrand, were able to work through their differences. I mean, if they could do it, if they could transform their conflict and become the Chuckles, and actually, Martin McGuinness became the Minister of Education and so on, then if they could do it, any of us can do it. So to me, that's the key, is that ability to work through your differences. It's not about suppressing them and forgetting them. It's like work through them and bring some humor. Humor helps.
No, I'm totally. I mean, I'm one of my two of the icons of history, people from history that I respect are Abraham Lincoln and FDR. Both had terrific senses of humor, even in our most dire times. So humor, yes, yes, yes. Now, William, we are racing through our time here, and as you know, I could go on for another 2 hours, but you are a busy person. I ask every guest a story about grace. Is there one that you can share with us, William?
Yeah, I'll share one with you that actually is how I got into this business. I was 21, 22, maybe 23. I was a graduate student at Harvard studying social anthropology. It was a cold January, freezing night around 10 a.m. On a Sunday night. I was grading papers and studying for my own exams, and I got a call, and at 10 p.m. and in those days, you never got calls from professors, and it said, "This is Professor Roger Fisher. I've just read your paper that you sent me, taking an anthropological perspective of the Middle East peace talks, and I thought the central chart in it was so interesting that I sent it to the Assistant Secretary of State for the Middle East, because he's working on Middle East peace negotiations. I thought he might find it useful. And would you come work with me?" And I was like speechless. I mean, it was talking about grace. I was speechless that, that some idea that I could actually be of practical use to a practitioner working on, the world's most difficult conflict. That I got hooked. I mean, it was a hugely generous invitation from Roger Fisher, and that call honestly changed my life. It felt like a moment of grace. I've been on that path ever since of trying to see if we can come up with creative, possibilist ideas that can help people facing really difficult situations, whether it's at work or in politics.
What a powerful story. That is truly a transformative story about grace, because I know you have, millions have benefited from your advice, be it from a book or having you as an advisor. William, how can people find you?
Well, they can find me on my website, which is just my name, williamury.com, ury.com, and or on LinkedIn, just William Ury. But I just, the one message I would have is we are all possibilists. It's just, we all have this innate potential. And I believe that your kind of listenership, the people listening right now, if we can bring that spirit of possibility, of curiosity, creativity, and collaboration to our conflicts, we can really help ourselves, our families, our workplaces, and our society.
What a great thought. And the title of your book is Possible: How We Survive and Thrive in an Age of Conflict. And boy, do we need it. William, it has been such an honor to speak to you. And with that, we will go out.